and they just stole it. Well, that was not a very smart one. Oh, welcome back, test subjects! And how appropriate that term is to today's comic in the Godzilla-thon. For by joining us, you have become a part of the weapons program meant to fight Godzilla and other creatures like him. The half-century war begins back during Godzilla's first attack on Japan in 1954. Lieutenant Ota Murakami, barely out of his teens and 2 years into his enlistment in the Japanese Defense Forces, has his platoon sent into Tokyo to provide disaster relief, only to be hit by that disaster head-on when Godzilla arrives to start annihilating the city. Noticing that the monster is going to head straight for some evacuating civilians, Ota and his friend Kentaro use the tank to distract Godzilla and lead it away from the civilians, just barely managing to survive as it heads out into the ocean. A month after the oxygen destroyer is deployed to kill Godzilla, the two are informed of a new Godzilla who's shown up. And unfortunately, the secret of the oxygen destroyer went down with its creator when they killed Godzilla. Sure, he didn't want to use it as a weapon of war, but damn it, half the fun of mad science is having this stuff at the ready again! And don't tell me he wasn't a mad scientist, he had an eye patch and everything! Since the two soldiers have had the most experience fighting Godzilla, they're recruited into the Anti-Megalosaurus Force, a division meant to test experimental weapons against Godzilla. Jump ahead 13 years to Vietnam, where Godzilla is now making his way through the war-weary country. While normally they could grab Godzilla's attention away and lure him back to the sea, this time something was making him ignore the military, moving with drive and resolve. The Americans have a plan to stop him, having built a giant sludge pit to keep him trapped, and then hopefully flatten him with ordnance. Despite the objections from the Japanese forces that conventional weapons don't work on him, the American general is stubborn. Oh yes, truly a great military mind. Ignore the people with actual experience with the threat. Fortunately, it's science to the rescue! Doc Randall, a drilling engineer, was recruited some time ago into the AMF and has developed not only specialized drills to punch through Godzilla's skin, but the sci-fi wonder weapon of Godzilla movies, the Maser Cannons! And indeed, after the Americans fail, the Masers seem to be rather effective. Until the ground opens up beneath them, revealing what it is that Godzilla has been chasing. Anguirus! They plan to let the monsters fight it out, then use the remaining 2 Maser Cannons to finish off the winner, but before Godzilla can kill Anguirus, the Americans bomb everything once more, and both monsters are able to withdraw without too much serious damage. However, Godzilla does not continue on its path, instead heading back to the sea. Following a hunch, Ota's superior officer went on ahead to Godzilla's path to see what it was he was chasing, and discovered some kind of radio device in a crashed plane that had been beaming signals out. Of course! Another mad scientist who knows the score! Control the giant monsters, and conquer the world! Jump ahead another 8 years to Ghana, as Ota reflects on all the new monsters that have come. Rodan from the Philippines, Batra, Megalon, Kumonga, Mothra, Ebera, Hedera, and so many more. The device that was in the crashed plane was an invention of Dr. Deverick, a former AMF scientist who had built a psionic transmitter to try to discourage Godzilla's attacks. And after that failed, he apparently turned it into a monster attractor instead, waking up all the other monsters on Earth. While they hunted for Dr. Deverick, eventually all the monsters began marching on Accra, capital of Ghana. The entire city is razed, save for a single building with the lights on, meaning that must be where the psionic transmitter is. Breaking inside and taking out a pair of guards, they locate Dr. Deverick, in the process of selling the power of the transmitters to any who wish to use it against a foreign enemy. You fool! You insane fool! You're supposed to use that power for yourself! Ransom the world's governments! Take over the world! You mad fool! Deverick escapes when they try to arrest him, just barely escaping as the monsters come crashing down on them. Another 12 years pass, and we find ourselves in Bombay, India. Ota is starting to feel the weight of 30 years of hunting Godzilla, not helped by the AMF being turned into glorified weather watchers in the wake of their failure at Accra. They could predict where the monsters would hopefully strike and maybe assist in damage control, but that was it. Other departments were formed, one creating Mechagodzilla to take on his originator, but while they watched the carnage from below, Ota manages to spot Deverick in the crowd and follows him after he sells a transmitter to two twins who say nothing. However, before they can shut off his latest transmitter, it summons forth a new abomination. Space Godzilla! How do you make a giant monster even better? Add the word space in front of it! For those of you unaware, Space Godzilla is indeed Godzilla from space, mutated from Godzilla's own cells as part of the latter Heisei-era movies. And this one comes down with crystals, wrecking Mechagodzilla and doing a fine job of dealing with the real deal. Ota manages to get into the wrecked Mechagodzilla and unleash its remaining payload on the giant crystals powering Space Godzilla, letting its namesake annihilate it in turn. And finally, 15 years after that encounter in Bombay, our little blue and green marble in the universe now has a distinctly more reddish tone to it. Think of it as you wish, as the blood of the human race. Or perhaps just a reminder of the constant fire created by the monsters. Mind you, as Ota writes the final few pages in his journal in the cold of Antarctica, not all of this was Godzilla's fault, but rather the two creatures summoned by Deverick's machine, King Ghidorah and Gigan, who turned the globe to cinders within a year of their arrival. And that's why doomsday devices like these are meant to scare people, damn it, not use them! What good is conquering a rock? Their last hope lies not only with Mechagodzilla, but an experimental weapon called the Dimension Tide. If shooting a miniaturized black hole at the monsters won't get rid of them, then they can just keep the damn planet. They lure Godzilla, Gigan, and Ghidorah to the same spot, and then join the fray. Godzilla even having enough rationality to join forces with his robotic counterpart to defeat the other two monsters. However, the enemy of my enemy is only my friend for as long as it needs to, and thus Ota sacrifices himself to ensure that Godzilla is absorbed by the Dimension Tide as well. Although in the final moments of the comic, some familiar spines begin to rise from the water. And thus ends the half-century war. Now the guns are silent. Godzilla is dead. But when you kill such a monster, where does it end up? Come back next week for the final comic in our Godzilla-thon to find out.